Can the Lorenz equations inspire a dress? Let's find out. So before we get into the designing of the dress, we need to know what the Lorenz equations actually are. So the Lorenz equations, the Lorenz Attractor, all the same thing. They are a series of differential equations. These equations were studied by a man named Edward Lorenz in the 1960s, which was kind of looking at the properties of this fluid layer that he wanted to know more about. So now that we know kind of the little history behind it, we need to figure out what is a differential equation. So let's start to take that down a little bit of what that actually means. So differential equations, all it's talking about is how the rate of change of one variable is affecting other variables. So for this, we're going to think about it in the case of speed. So like with your car. So depending on how fast your car is going, that affects your position and the time at the moment that your car is actually driving. So if we want to put this in equation form, we can say x equals the position of our car, and v is our velocity or our speed, and we can say that the derivative of x equals v, and this derivative is taken in respect to time. So the position of our car at a certain amount of time will give us our speed. Or if we take the derivative of where that car is at a certain amount of time, we can know how fast the car is going. So equations like this, they can get very complicated very quickly, but this is just a very simple example of a differential equation. So now let's go back to our Lorenz system of equations. So those equations, there's actually three of them. One where it's the derivative of x, the derivative of y, and the derivative of z. So the first thing that should tell us is that we're actually dealing with a three-dimensional system. So this is going to be something that we'll be able to plot and visualize, which I thought would be a really great way to show the dress. These are the three equations though. You can see we have three different constants. So these are just values that will not change. You give them a particular value. The cat decided to help as well. Then x, y, and z, those are what our actual values that are changing are going to be. So these relate to that fluid layer that Lorenz was originally investigating and researching. Now, what he saw was that when you have these equations and you use very particular initial conditions, you can start to see a pattern that is chaotic. And what that means is that you're not able to predict what it's going to do. So for this system, he used that sigma equals 10, rho equals 2.8, and beta equals 8/3. And when he did this, he got a very chaotic pattern. And one of the best ways that I think about chaos is if you think back to Jurassic Park, where Jeff Goldblum's character kind of talks about a little bit. This is the same chaos theory though, same idea of chaos. It's just something that is unpredictable. So the whole butterfly wing effect, all of this is related to each other. So basically what Lorenz saw was he got this butterfly-like shape where it would just continue going on forever. And you can plot this as well, so a lot of people do that now, so I'm just showing you a very quick example in Python where you have rho, sigma, and beta, and we have our equations listed where it says derivatives, and then when you run this, you actually get that three-dimensional plot as well. So this is just a different view of it, and you can start to see how that butterfly shape comes to be. So how does this design a dress? So for the design itself, I really wanted to play off that butterfly effect and basically have a dress that had very large shoulders. I thought that would be really interesting and really fun. The way that I did this was I went to the fabric store and found this really pretty green suede mint fabric, kind of like a mint green. I decided to make a very simple dress out of it and I started to drape this on my mannequin. So again, just keeping it very simple, so something along this shape, and then adding straps. So the first step was I flipped the fabric so that the right side was on the back of the mannequin so that I could start to add the hem, so how I would do the top of it. So I started to pin my fabric onto the mannequin so that I would easily be able to flip that top piece of fabric over so I could remove that raw edge. I also added a couple darts at the front just to give it a little bit more shape and to hug the body a little bit better. So here's that top seam that I'm going to be taking, as well as the two darts that I added to give it a little bit more shape. So here's what it looks like after it was sewn. So you can see those two darts at the front look really nice, and then at the top you are able to see that I did take that hem all the way around. So now it's time to add the straps. I want to keep these straps very simple, again just really focusing on the shoulders, not necessarily the dress itself. For the straps, what I'm going to do is just take some of the exact same fabric and then probably give it about 1.5 inches wide strap. So I cut out a 3-inch piece of fabric, folded it over on itself, and then tried to determine exactly how long I wanted the straps to be. I purposely left these straps to be pretty long, that way I have room to work with. So now what I'm going to do is pin them up so that I can take that seam and then turn them right side out so that I can actually start to pin them on my dress and get them in place. And here is what my straps look like. So I ended up pinning them, found the right spot for it. As you can see, there's no raw edges anymore. So what I'm gonna do is probably just actually go back all the way around my dress where I did that original top stitch so that I can just make sure that these straps are in place very nicely. They're not gonna fall off. I'm trying to make it so this dress is something that I could wear at any other time as well. So this is what the dress currently looks like. This is, as you can tell, is the wrong side. So now I have to sew up that side seam. I want to keep it fairly close to the body, so not leaving too much room. So I'm just going to pin this all the way down and then take that long seam. Luckily, the fabric I chose does have some give to it, so I'm not going to have to worry about adding a zipper. And here's what our dress looks like so far. I really like how it's coming out and I really like the color. So you can see there's no more raw edges and everything's fitting very nicely, just a very nice and simple dress. So now the last step that we have to do is add that hem, as the dress is very long at the bottom. I ended up doing this so that it would hit probably just below the knee a little bit. So I'm just going to take a straight seam all the way across. And this is what the completed dress looks like. So as you can tell, it was just a very nice, simple dress. It's going to be very comfortable to wear. And now it's time to work on the big butterfly effect. So I got this really nice cotton batik fabric, and what I'm going to do is actually hem up both ends so that there's no raw edges on either side. Once I do that, I'm going to start adding pleats. So I thought it'd be really interesting to get that like line effect, to put as many pleats as possible into this yard of fabric. Now for the fabric to work, I did cut this in half so I would have two separate pieces, one for each shoulder. And this is what it looked like. You can see all the pleats, and I have them all pinned up both on either edge as well as in the middle in a couple places so that I can make sure to really hold in that pleat effect. Once it was all sewn up, I did press it to try to really bring out those lines, and then I placed it on top of the mannequin. So this is what it looks like so far. It has a really nice shawl effect, but well, first, can we just focus that the cat was obsessed with this dress. She was always around it. But besides that, you can tell that there's lots of lines going on, and it really does look like that butterfly pattern that you would see in the plot itself. So this is both on the front and the back of the shawl. So the next day, what I ended up doing was I placed it back onto the mannequin, and I realized I needed to connect these together. To sew it together, I had with the right sides together, I pinned it across at both the front and the back. And then once I did that, I was able to have this one completed shawl piece of fabric so that everything was connected. The last step was just to trim off some of those loose threads and extra pieces of fabric to make sure it would lay nice and flat. And here is what the completed shawl looks like. As you can tell, it lays very nicely with the dress, and it kind of has that big shoulder effect. You can also see the really fun pleats in the back, which I think just gives it that whole Lorenz equation look, which I love. As you can tell, the pleats on one side are a little different than the pleats on the other side, so they both don't lay exactly the same. And that was on purpose. Since the Lorenz equations do provide a chaotic effect, I wanted the shawl to also kind of have that unpredictable effect too. So what do you think? Did we create a dress based off the Lorenz equations? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video and want to see more, be sure to like and subscribe.